transition like what did they treat you like when you're
Great question. Actually getting into the hospital was a bit of a blur. I don't really remember the evaluation process, but I do remember being in there. Basically every minute of every day was planned for you, and for the first 24 hours I felt like I was a monkey in a cage, because for 24 hours after someone's been admitted on a suicide attempt, they watch you every minute of every day. They watch you shower, they watch you go to the toilet, they watch you sleep. So you're in this entire room with 10 other people in glass room. It's a glass room where they're watching you as you sleep. It was an interesting experience, as I said, and I was extremely angry being there, but I also knew that's exactly where I needed to be. I took time, I was journaling, I was reading, and I was there for 5 days, but it was also, you're medicated, and as soon as you're medicated, they ask you the question of, how do you think the medication's working? And because I was studying psychology, I knew that antidepressants took at least 2 weeks to work. So they're looking for that placebo effect. They're looking for, oh, hey, you're taking medication, do you feel any better today? And some people would say yes. And because it is that, yep, I'm taking medication, I know that I'm getting better. Whereas I literally said to the psychiatrist, it's like, antidepressants take 2 weeks to have any effect, so it's not affecting me. So I'm going to outsmart you. But then they also ask, because they would do a survey every day of, rate your feelings or your depressive symptoms on a scale of 1 to 10, rate your feelings of anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10. And prior to that, I had never used the word anxiety in my life. But because that question had been asked, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, do I have anxiety? Like, what are my anxiety levels now? Which, that's an interesting concept in itself. But that was probably, I don't know if that answers your question. But
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So you said that you worked on a text service.
Yep.
Did you work in a call centre with, being on the phone with a person, or was it just texting?
Yeah. So I think being on a call service would obviously be that next level of challenging, because you don't even have that time to respond. Whereas text line, you have that time to respond, and you would be at a point where, I think I got to a point where you're taking 5 to 6 conversations at a time, and so you're prioritising the ones that are high risk, so it might be self-harming or suicide, and then you've got others who just need someone to talk to, and so you might take a little bit longer to get back to those. But I would typically have the most success with those texters, because I would relate to them in a human way. So yes, you've got your training and you're supposed to say, they say don't ask 2 questions in a row because that can feel like an interrogation. And so you go into this training being like, oh yeah, I've got to change up every technique that I use and every response that I have, and it's just, that's not human. And I've had a couple of texters that would ask me, am I talking to a robot? I feel like I'm talking to Siri right now, because it was very robotic. And it wasn't until I took the notes from the training, but responded in a human way, that I would have positive results. But having said that, the last texter that I ever took, in essence blamed their suicide attempt on me and said, thank you 741, which was crisis text line number. You're the reason that I'm ending my life. I've now taken forward, I've taken whatever I've taken, and I hope you know that you're the reason. And I never took a conversation after that. I was planning on actually ending that night anyway, because I would be working from 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. as a volunteer, and it was just taking an emotional toll on myself. But yeah, I was like, you know what, this is one of those, I guess, full circle moments of, I didn't take that personally, because I knew that that individual was in a heap of pain. And I think having been through what I went through and being on the other side of things, where I, in essence blamed my partner, that wasn't my partner's fault. I had these needs weren't being met, but that wasn't her responsibility. In the same way that, or a similar way to this texter, that it had nothing to do with me and everything to do with what that individual was feeling. They were feeling so much pain, they projected that on me. That's a very human thing to do. And I think that takes a level of understanding. When you've been through that, you can take a step back and be like, this actually has nothing to do with me. This person is just in pain. Yeah.
I know you've said a lot about your mental struggle with like getting injuries and everything during soccer. Did you ever find that like games that you're not winning, you said that you guys lost the grand final and stuff like that, did that take like a big mental toll on you as well?
I think it took a toll on me because of I expected my teammates to react a certain way, and here I moved countries to play the sport that I loved. Whereas in America, their why for playing soccer was completely different. So a lot of them, they only played in college because it was paying for their education. And so I saw, like, when my teammates told me that that's the only reason they were playing college, I'm like, are you serious? Like, I'm playing soccer because I love it, you know? And it took me coaching for 2 years in America to realize that a lot of the individuals in America were extrinsically oriented when it came to sport. So everything was tailored towards getting a college scholarship. So once they finally got that college scholarship, they didn't really care about the sport, which is why they don't really continue playing sport after they graduate, because they're like, oh, I did what I needed to do. Whereas in obviously Australia, because there isn't that incentive necessarily with money, now there's starting to be a little bit of money and whatever else, but you play because you love it, you know, and it's been that way for many, many years. And what I've found is, and what I've done for a couple of years at Salisbury Inter, I should say, I'll get in trouble if I just say Salisbury, is at the start of the season, as part of the team bonding exercise, I asked all the individuals, why did you choose to play for Salisbury Inter? And because I think understanding why people are there can give you an understanding and an appreciation for their motivation for training and their expectations. So, 2 years ago, or at the start of last year, one of our teammates, Chilean international, she was there because she wanted to win a championship. You know, that was the reason that she was there. Whereas the majority most of the team were there because of the coach. And so understanding that, and understanding that some people were there because of the social reasons, because their friends play there, you're not going to push them as hard because they've got no desire to play for the Matildas, you know, but whereas, the teammate that wanted to win a championship, obviously she's going to get upset when people aren't performing as well because that's what she's wanting to get out of it. And so I think having that understanding and appreciation that people don't have the same motivating reasons or the same motivation as what you do, that's really helped me since then. And I think also keeping things into perspective, you know, does it really matter if you win or lose a game? Are you going to remember that in 10 or 15 years' time? No, you're not. And I think last year when I gave a presentation at the awards night, I said, you know, we lost in, I think, the prelim finals, had the potential to probably go on to the grand final. And I said, you know, achievements look good on your resume. It's something that you put on a piece of paper and it's like, yeah, that's great. But connections look better on your eulogy. So, you know, it doesn't matter what you've achieved, it matters who you've achieved it with and the people that are beside you. You know, you can achieve the world's greatest things, but if you're doing it alone, how good is it? And I think keeping that into perspective, you know, in a time that if we lose a game, it's like, yeah, it sucks, but I'm not going to let this consume me because in 10, 15 years' time, I'm not going to remember this. I'll remember my teammates and the laughs that we had with one another. But as for the actual soccer and the playing side of things, that's a small part of it. And I think that goes for anything in life. You meet someone down the street, you're not thinking, oh, what have you done in life? You know, what trophies have you won? You know, you don't give a shit about what anyone's done. You care about how they treat you in that moment. You know, do they acknowledge you? Do they smile at you? And to me, that is what matters most. Not, again, the accolades that you collect along the way or how many wins and losses that you've had in the season. Yes, we all want to win. Who doesn't want to win? Nobody really likes losing, but is it the most important thing? I don't think it is. But everyone has their own opinion.
You started to speak about your training and you spoke about what Module 1 was. We can actually get to Module 2.
Yeah, right, thanks. I go on these things. That's not a surprise. So Module 1 is basically becoming a safe environment. So it's how to build rapport, the 5 good contact techniques, which again I learned from the crisis text line training. And then Module 2 is more mental health specific. So it looks at, okay, how do you risk assess someone who's suicidal? How do you respond to someone who's self-harming? How do you respond to someone who's got an eating disorder? What things to say, what things to avoid saying, and also collaborative problem solving, which I think is a really important concept because it's not about fixing anyone, it's about exploring what it is that's going on and helping them realise that they have the skills to help themselves. So your role is sort of a facilitator, it's not that of a fixer. So I think, we think that we probably, everyone needs to go see a psychologist, right? Well, if that's the case, then we're never going to get into to see a psychologist because they're going to be in such high demand. Imagine if every single time that you cut your finger, you had to go see a doctor. You would never be able to see a doctor because they'd be inundated with trivial things like with a headache or something like that. And I feel that way with psychologists. We don't need more psychologists. Well, yes, we do in the same way that we need more doctors, but that's not the solution. The solution is to train the majority of individuals and adults, and kids too, to have these skills that they can support these people so they don't have to go see a psychologist. Because what I think is happening is that we're all experiencing, chronic stress, and when we're chronically stressed, the next thing up from chronic stress is a crisis, and that's when people feel like they need a psychologist because they're not dealing with the stress here, because the people around them don't know how to support them in that moment, and obviously when it gets to this level, they definitely don't know how to support them. And I think that, in essence, connection is the antidote to a lot of what we're feeling, and a lot of what we're struggling with. It's just not hypothesis. So.
I've heard you speak a couple of times, and you and I have had a number of conversations, and whilst we did preempt a few things, there is something that's pretty genuine, and I know your story well enough to know that you don't end up in the US if you don't have some talent and somebody doesn't think you're good. But clearly within all of that, you must have known that you were good enough, at least in some eyes, but there was always that nagging thought in the back of your head that you weren't getting the respect from others that you should have. And I guess it comes down to, what was the trigger? Because I know the conversations we have had around those things. So what was the trigger between you thinking that no one gave you the respect that you deserved, which meant that you couldn't be the best that you needed to being the person you are today, which is clearly who you always wanted to be, for forever?
Yep. Great question. So I think 2018, when I reread A New Earth, something that became quite apparent to me was I actually realised that some of the motivating factors for me helping people stem from actually an insecurity within, that I didn't feel like I was good enough unless I was helping people, that I needed to help people to validate who I was. And so then I started to explore this not feeling good enough. Is that maybe why I keep getting injured? Because there's this innate belief of, you're not good enough. And so your body tries to give you, in essence, what you're feeling. Law of attraction. How many people have heard of law of attraction? So it's the energy that you put out is the energy that you get back. So for me, being constantly worried about getting injured, guess what the universe is going to give you more of? You're going to get injured. In the same way that if you think about all the things that you don't want in a relationship, guess what the universe is going to give you more of? All the things that you don't want. And so it's about elevating that energy level to attracting what it is that you do want. So when I became aware of this, that, wow, I don't feel like I'm good enough. And that stemmed back to me growing up as a child, not feeling like I was good enough because of my sexuality. There was a lot of shame associated with my sexuality. And I think becoming conscious of that really helped. I then read a book, You Are the Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and for nights I would work on trying to change my energy level. So it's like, okay, what do you want to feel? So instead of feeling like I wasn't good enough, I wanted to feel like I was good enough. But then I had a friend who I'd met coincidentally, who then said, no, don't just say that you feel good enough. Tell yourself that you feel fucking amazing, that you feel invincible. Because that has a higher energy level than just, I feel good enough. Because when we think of you feel good enough, it's associated with, well, you don't feel good enough. So you have to think about something that's contrary to that. So I put a lot of conscious effort into changing that energy level. And that was in 2018, and I ended up having a healthy season, so I didn't get injured at all. And then it wasn't until at the end of that year, I was trialling for Adelaide United, because that had been a dream of mine since I was, I don't even know how long, probably 14 or 15. and I trialled really well, but still didn't get a contract. And I was absolutely livid. You know, I worked my ass off that year. I did all these extra training sessions, did all these extra fitness sessions, because I thought, yep, I have to be in better shape in my life. I had teammates ask me, you know, has the coach spoken to you? And I said, no. I said, we don't understand why, you know, you're standing out in games and in trainings. And I was like, well, at the end of the day, if someone doesn't like you, there's literally nothing you can do to change their perception of you. After that, after I got cut from that, I was pretty heartbroken. I wrote about it in a blog post, and just about how so much of where we end up is luck-based and opportunity-based. If you're never given an opportunity, how can you really achieve what you want to achieve? The following year, or that year, I then had a coach who sought me out and wanted me to join Salisbury Inter, and wanted me there not because of my playing abilities, but because of my leadership abilities. And she said to me, you know, I can really help you. And so she approached it from the perspective that she can help me, not I can help her and the club. And at the time, Salisbury Inter were facing relegation, I think, that year, or one spot away from facing relegation. But she was looking for someone to professionalise the culture there. So immediately she seen me as the whole person that I was, not just as a player that could do the job on the field. And I remember the first training session that we had, and she was commending me on my leadership ability, my ability to encourage teammates, and all these things that had been overlooked by previous coaches because they just didn't value those things, which there's nothing wrong with, but it's just we weren't compatible. You know, the values that these coaches had and the values that I held dear were not compatible for one another. And so here I was in an environment where I was finally being valued for myself as a whole person. But still, throughout the year, despite playing really, really well, you know, my coach was saying, you know, Nicole, you're playing out of, you know, out of your skin, and you absolutely should be in W League. And I'm going to ask questions. And I'm like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because the person who's in control of whether or not I play W League doesn't think that I'm good enough. And so I kept internalizing that as I'm still not good enough. Because I remember a conversation with my brother who said, you know, you have to go out there and you have to prove why that coach absolutely has to have you on the team. You know, give them no reason to overlook you, like as though it's within my control. And I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, I need to go out there and I need to stand out and I need to do all of those things. And we believe that. We believe that hard work pays off. We believe that if you work hard, you can achieve anything that you want to achieve. But we neglect to acknowledge that sometimes luck and opportunity play into where we end up. That's not to say that hard work doesn't pay off, but it doesn't always pay off in the way that we had envisioned in our mind. And it was a conversation with my coach, and she explained to me that she was applying for this new position in the police force. And she was more than qualified. She was the most qualified person applying for this position. But there was a member on the board who didn't like her, and so she didn't get the position. And I said to her, I was like, how do you deal with that rejection? You know, how do you not internalize that as you're not good enough? And she said, it's their loss. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, it is their loss. Like, I know that I'm great, and I know that they're missing out by not having me. And I was like, can you teach me to have that confidence, please? And it was that conversation that got me thinking. It's like, you know what? Yes, it is their loss if they don't want you. And not every single person is going to like you, whether it's a coach, whether it's a friend, whether it's a partner, whoever else it is. Like, not everyone is going to like you. It might be a boss who doesn't offer you the job for promotion. You can't change their perception, and no matter what you do, it's not going to influence how they see you. There was an analogy in a book called Unlearn, where it said, you could be the juiciest and the ripest peach and the most amazing peach in the world, right? And there's still going to be people that don't like peaches. And there's going to be people that are allergic to peaches. And guess what? You can't change that. So instead of investing your energy in these individuals who don't value you, who don't appreciate you, go spend time with the people that do. Because you are never going to be able to change their perception of how they see you. And why would you want to? If someone doesn't value you, why would you want to do that? And so for me, I have now spent and focused my attention on the environments where I do feel valued, where I do feel appreciated. And so probably for the first time in my life, Salisbury Inter is a club where I do feel like I belong, and I do feel connected to everyone there, and the culture that we have and the culture that we've created is incredible. And a lot of the girls, they talk about it, that we actually are, I hate using the word family because I think that's such a cliche word that people throw around when it comes to clubs, but if you come to Salisbury Inter, you will recognise that it starts from the top, from the club president being welcoming of absolutely everyone that steps foot there. And I think that, you know, having not had that as a kid growing up, that it makes me appreciate what I have now so much more. And I think that sometimes you have to go without to truly appreciate what you do have. Contrast necessary and genuine appreciation. There's a blog post on that.
You talk about culture, and I know the Salisbury journey quite well, and it didn't have anything, and obviously they identified that they had a goal, right? And I know that. And it wasn't luck that brought it. So how have you worked and who have you worked with? Because obviously just you and coach couldn't do it on your own. And you mentioned president, so players, the whole, so what does that look like?
So it was probably, so the coach made the initial contact, and it was that approach of, I can help you. And she knew me as a person. She knew that I had these qualities as a person and she valued them, which was a big selling point for me. And then the club president, team manager and captain at the time, when they met up to talk with me, they drove down to Warradale to meet me, and I live at Marion, so for them to drive down from Salisbury to Marion, that to me that showed that they did truly value me and value my time, and they wanted to make it work. And so that was probably the start of it. And then it was, you know, Tracy actually saying, because it was Tracy Jenkins, I don't know, some of you guys might know her. From the start, she reinforced all of the qualities that, you know, I felt I had been overlooked for. And within the first year, made me vice captain straight away. There was definitely some problems in that first year in the sense of you had the players who had been there for many years, who then all of a sudden there's a new player that's come in and they're trying to professionalise things, and that those players don't really want that. They want the social side of things. And that was quite difficult because they were at times could be quite vocal towards me, and there was a time during one of the games where they were so mean and yelling at me during the whole game to the point where you know, we drew with Metro I think for the first time in the club's history, and I cried after the game because of how my teammates spoke to me. I had a teammate on the opposition who said to me, they're like, you know, are you okay? And I said, yeah, why is that? And they said, because we heard the way that your teammates were speaking to you. And so it didn't start out as an amazing culture. You know, you still have to filter some of those, I guess, bad apples, or people that just aren't compatible for that environment. That doesn't mean that they're bad people, it just means that what they wanted and what the club wanted weren't compatible. And I think when a couple of those players left, and then you add in a couple of other very mature, great people who have great characters. So one of those would be Chrissa, who came in last year. She added a lot to the club just because of who she is as a person. And there was, so Shance and myself then became co-captains last year, and same again this year. And I really like the concept of co-captains, co-coaching, rather than having a head coach and an assistant coach, or a captain and a vice captain, just because there's that vertical hierarchy rather than a horizontal hierarchy. I really like the concept of working together with someone, and I've been very fortunate in the environments that I have those relationships, that Shance and I complement each other very well. Work together very well. Chris and I coach together, and there isn't that, you know, well, you're the head coach and I'm the assistant coach. It's, you know, we bounce ideas off of each other without that ego, without that, oh, well, what are you doing sort of thing. And fortunate with that in the work environment as well. So those would probably be the core people. Then obviously you've got the club president in Bianca and Tam, who, you know, they organise family dinners every Wednesday night. So after trainings we have family meals, and you know, the majority of the team stick around for that, which I think is a testament to the culture. And I know that throughout last year, they would cook for a couple of us who lived far away, so that, you know, we're getting fed straight after training rather than getting fed at 10 p.m. at night, and develop friendships there. And it's one of those things that it's not exclusive, that if anyone wants to stick around, then they'll cook for them too. And I think that that's really important, because it's very easy to have those sort of cliques within a team, especially with management and whatever else. So I'd say that those have probably been the core people in building that culture. Yes.
If somebody here just now is struggling themselves, or knows of somebody else that is struggling, what would you suggest they do kind of straight off?
Great question. I guess if you know that someone's struggling, to ask them the questions of, and state what you've noticed. So say, hey, I've noticed that you've been feeling a bit down. I just want to check in. Is everything okay? And they might just be like, yep, everything's fine. Or instead of approaching it from that way, you can say, hey, do you want to grab a coffee? Do you want to go for a walk? So I think that going for a walk with someone is a great way to build that rapport. It's less daunting than going for a coffee where you're sitting across from someone. Not everyone drinks coffee either. Barbarians. And yeah, so I'd suggest that if you're worried about someone. If someone in here is struggling, it's one of those hard things that there's so much out there that tells you, oh, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that, you should be meditating every day, and who knows whether or not that helps. There are a lot of self-care strategies out there, but you have to figure out the ones that work for you the best. So for me, what I do is I write and I journal, or not journal, because again, that comes with a lot of connotations to it. I don't do it every day, I do it whenever I feel the need to. So if I'm going through something, I might just jot down some notes on my phone, never revisit them, or might revisit them in a couple of years' time when I share my journal with someone else, or share my notes with someone else and make them cry. Referring to Jazz here. Sorry to put you out. And yeah, so if you notice that someone's struggling, and the whole collaborative problem-solving side of things is exploring, okay, you can ask them, how long have you been feeling this way for? And they might say, oh, 6 weeks. Did anything happen 6 weeks ago that really triggered these emotions? And then you sort of go into, okay, well, what was going on with you at the time? And you can explore a little bit like that. And I think asking those questions is, again, taking that active interest and showing them, hey, no, I do genuinely care, rather than be like, oh, I'm here, do you need anyone to talk to? It's like, what effort have you actually made for that person to show them that you care? And ask questions, because at the end of the day, if someone doesn't want to answer, you give them that choice. But by not asking the question, you don't give them that choice. If someone doesn't want to answer, they're like, no, I don't actually feel comfortable talking about that. Totally fine, respect their decision. You've now planted a seed that you've asked the question, and they might come back to you and say, oh, actually, can I speak to you about something? I don't know if that answers your question. Yes.
I don't know, it's probably a bit of a different one, but it's just kind of out of curiosity, but was your partner like a part of your soccer team, or was she involved in sport at all? And like, do you think, was she?
In America.
Yeah, in America.
No, she wasn't.
So she wasn't involved in sport at all. Do you think that created sort of a different dynamic for you?
I think at the start it was appealing because obviously soccer community can be quite small in the sense that everyone's been with everyone sometimes. So I think that was a benefit, because then I was also interested in her life outside of sport, but there probably wasn't that understanding of what it was like to have this as a primary identity. For me, soccer was my coping mechanism. For me to tear my ACL, it wasn't just an injury, that was all my hopes, dreams and expectations gone. I questioned whether or not I would ever play soccer again. And I went through that again when I did my ACL in 2019. It was a case of, when's enough? When is enough enough? 3 ACLs, at what point do you say, look, your body just hates you? Yeah, so I think that it had its benefits, but also had its downsides too.